Imagine that for centuries, a powerful secret remained buried beneath layers of doctrine, erased from the pages of history, and hidden in the vaults of religious institutions. The Jesus known to the world today has been carefully crafted to fit within a system designed to control, but beneath that image lies something entirely different, something far more dangerous. The ancient texts, long suppressed, reveal a side of Jesus that contradicts everything modern religion has taught. He wasn't simply a preacher of obedience and faith. He was a teacher of transformation, an alchemist of the soul, a master of a hidden wisdom capable of unlocking the divine spark within every human being. These were not just words meant to comfort, but teachings meant to awaken. Among the scrolls and gospels excluded from the Bible, pieces of this hidden wisdom remain intact. The Gospel of Thomas, a text unearthed in 1945 after being buried for over 1,000 years, records Jesus saying that immortality is not granted but discovered. The Gospel of Philip speaks of secret initiations, rituals of unification, and a knowledge so profound that those who understood it could transcend the physical world. The secret book of John describes a cosmic deception, revealing that the Creator worshipped by millions was never meant to be followed. These writings describe a different reality, one where the divine is not something external, but something within. They describe a world where the forces that govern reality can be understood and reshaped, a world where the true teachings of Jesus were not about waiting for salvation, but about achieving mastery over existence itself. The early followers of this wisdom understood what it meant. They saw Jesus not as a distant savior, but as a guide, someone who had uncovered the hidden mechanisms of life and was trying to pass them on. He spoke in riddles and parables not to confuse, but because true understanding is not given, it is earned. Scripture never intended the miracles to be literal. Walking on water, turning water into wine, rising from the dead. These were symbols of something deeper, a blueprint for an internal transformation that could be experienced by anyone who sought the truth. Water into wine represented the refinement of consciousness. Walking on water demonstrated the ability to rise above emotional turbulence. Resurrection was not about the body, but about transcending the limitations of fear, ignorance, and control. Alchemy, long associated with turning lead into gold, was never truly about metal. The transformation it described was a metaphor for the evolution of the self, the process of refining the soul until it reached its highest state. The same principles exist within the teachings of Jesus: the merging of opposites, the death of the old self, the birth of something greater. These are the steps of an ancient formula embedded within his words. The religious institutions that later formed around his name recognize the danger in this knowledge. A person who understands their own divine nature does not submit. A person who sees through the illusion of fear cannot be manipulated. The power of institutions depends on the obedience of the masses, and there is no obedience without dependence. Over time, the message was altered. The kingdom of heaven became a distant paradise instead of an inner realization. Miracles became supernatural spectacles instead of lessons in mastery. Faith was twisted into submission, and knowledge was deemed heretical. The texts that spoke too plainly were either rewritten or destroyed, and those who carried the old knowledge were silenced. Despite every effort to erase this truth, remnants of it still exist, waiting to be rediscovered. The lost Gospels, the ancient symbols, and the whispers of forbidden wisdom, all of them point back to the same understanding. The key to transformation was never meant to be hidden behind priests or locked away in sacred books. It was meant to be lived, experienced, and realized by every individual willing to seek it. Remember to join our community by subscribing to this channel. The lost magic of Jesus was never about divine intervention. It was about unlocking the forces that shape reality, aligning the inner and outer worlds, and stepping into a state of awareness that changes everything. The world is not as solid as it seems. The limits imposed by fear and ignorance are illusions, and those who dare to break them discover something extraordinary. Long ago, powerful forces decided that certain truths should never reach the masses. They understood that knowledge is the greatest form of power, and power, once shared, is impossible to control. To ensure that only a chosen few could access this knowledge, an intricate system of suppression was built, one designed to erase, distort, and manipulate the very teachings that once promised freedom. The most effective way to control a population is not through chains but through ideas. By shaping belief, those in power can influence thoughts, actions, and perceptions without ever lifting a sword. The lost teachings of Jesus were a direct threat to this kind of authority because they emphasized personal enlightenment over blind obedience. They didn't call for submission to institutions, but encouraged direct connection with the divine. A society built on these principles would have been impossible to govern through fear. In the early days of Christianity, there was no single version of Jesus' message. Dozens of interpretations existed, spread across different communities. The Gnostics, a group devoted to mystical wisdom, saw Jesus as a guide rather than a deity to be worshipped. Their texts, filled with powerful metaphors and hidden truths, taught that divinity was within every individual and that spiritual awakening was a personal journey, not something dictated by religious authorities. As the Roman Empire saw Christianity growing, leaders realized that this movement could be used as a tool. Instead of suppressing it outright, they shaped it into something more manageable, a structured religion with strict rules, controlled teachings, and a clear hierarchy. This transformation wasn't about preserving the truth. It was about ensuring obedience. Books that contradicted this new doctrine were declared heretical. The Gospel of Thomas, which claimed that enlightenment comes from within, was erased from official history. The Gospel of Mary, which suggested that deeper knowledge was available to those who sought it, was dismissed as false. The Gospel of Philip, which hinted at ancient practices of spiritual transformation, was locked away and forgotten. Instead of guiding people toward self-discovery, Christianity became a system of control. Knowledge was replaced with faith, questions were replaced with commandments, and spiritual growth was replaced with dependence. To keep the masses compliant, religious leaders needed a way to instill fear. A system was built around the idea that only through the church could salvation be attained. The concept of heaven and hell became a weapon, used not to enlighten, but to manipulate. Before this, many ancient traditions saw the afterlife as a continuation of the soul's journey, not as a place of eternal reward or punishment. The original teachings of Jesus suggested that heaven was not a distant paradise, but a state of consciousness, something that could be realized in this life. This idea was dangerous to those in power. A person who understood that they could access heaven without the church had no reason to submit. A person who knew that enlightenment came from within would no longer fear punishment. To maintain authority, heaven was placed out of reach, a prize only granted to those who followed religious laws, paid tithes, and obeyed without question. Hell, in turn, became the ultimate fear trigger. Eternal suffering, endless torment, these were terrifying ideas, but their purpose wasn't to reveal truth. It was to make sure people stayed afraid to think for themselves. By making salvation dependent on obedience, religious institutions created a cycle of control that lasted for centuries. The most dangerous idea Jesus taught was that each person is capable of spiritual transformation. His words were never about following rules, but about unlocking inner potential. He spoke of the power to shape reality, the ability to connect directly with the divine, and the importance of self-mastery. But these ideas didn't serve those who sought power. Therefore, those seeking power twisted, rewrote, and repurposed these ideas. Instead of being taught that individuals hold the key to their own awakening, people were conditioned to believe that they were weak, sinful, and in need of saving. The very idea of questioning was discouraged. Instead of being seen as seekers of wisdom, those who asked too many questions were labeled heretics. Instead of being encouraged to explore, those who sought deeper understanding were warned that they were straying from the path. Throughout history, those who rediscovered fragments of this knowledge paid a heavy price. The Cathars, a medieval group that embraced Gnostic principles, were wiped out in a brutal crusade. The Hermeticists, who studied ancient wisdom, were persecuted and forced into secrecy. Mystics, philosophers, and scholars who dared to challenge religious dogma were silenced, imprisoned, or executed. Resistance greeted knowledge each time it re-emerged. Yet despite centuries of suppression, it never fully disappeared. The truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of resurfacing. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have spoken of a process of refinement, a way to elevate the soul beyond its limited state. In alchemy, this procedure was known as the transmutation of base metals into gold, a metaphor for the elevation of consciousness. In esoteric traditions, it was described as the merging of opposites, the balancing of mind, body, and spirit to unlock a higher self. Jesus, in his hidden teachings, echoed these same principles. In the Gospel of Thomas, he declared that once a person knows themselves fully, they will no longer be mortal, but will merge with the eternal. In the Gospel of Philip, he spoke of a sacred process of unification, where an individual, by understanding their own divine nature, could transcend the limitations of the physical world. The transformation Jesus described was not an abstract concept. It was a disciplined practice of aligning one's thoughts, emotions, and spirit with the underlying truth of existence. The idea was radical because it meant that no one needed a priest, a temple, or an institution to access divinity. The sacred was not something distant or external, it was something already present, waiting to be realized. We must leave something behind before this transformation can occur. The ego, the conditioned mind, the false identity constructed by fear and societal expectations, this must be dissolved. Ancient traditions, from Gnosticism to Eastern mysticism, have long emphasized that the self people cling to is an illusion, a mask that hides their true nature. This process is not easy. It requires confronting the deepest fears, shedding long-held attachments, and stepping into the unknown. Those who resist this transformation remain trapped in the cycle of suffering, repeating the same patterns, believing that they are powerless. But for those who embrace it, a new reality begins to unfold. The hidden wisdom of Jesus speaks of unification, not just of body and spirit, but of all dualities that divide existence. Within every individual, opposing forces battle for dominance, reason against intuition, logic against feeling, action against surrender. The ancient path of self-deification requires merging these elements into a harmonious whole. Are you enjoying the story? Support our channel by clicking the subscribe button. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus spoke of a time when the two will become one, when opposites will dissolve and something greater will emerge. This mirrors the alchemical principle of the union of opposites, the sacred marriage between the masculine and feminine energies within every soul. By achieving this balance, an individual steps into their full power. The mind becomes clear, emotions cease to dominate, and the body aligns with the highest frequencies of existence. This is when the miraculous becomes natural, when transformation ceases to be a struggle and instead becomes a flow. This most controversial and dangerous teaching from the lost texts is that humans are an extension of the divine. Jesus, through parables and metaphors, was not trying to create a system of worship. He was attempting to wake people up to their own potential. The Gospel of Philip makes a shocking statement. You saw Christ, you became Christ. You saw the Father. You shall become the Father. We did not intend these words to have a symbolic meaning. They suggest that by fully integrating wisdom, by understanding the fundamental nature of reality, a person becomes the very force they once believed was external. The ancient world was rich with esoteric traditions. The Egyptians, Essenes, Greek philosophers, and early Gnostics knew reality was more than sight and touch. They spoke of hidden forces, sacred geometry, alchemical transformation, and the ability of the mind to shape existence. These same concepts, though carefully veiled, can be found within the words of Jesus, but only for those who know how to decipher them. Mysticism does not reveal its truths openly. It requires effort, a willingness to go deeper than what is immediately apparent. This is why Jesus spoke in parables, why his teachings seemed riddled with mysteries, and why he often said, "Let those with ears to hear, hear." To those who could see beyond the literal, his words contained profound spiritual technology. When he described the kingdom of heaven, he was not speaking of a place beyond the clouds, but rather an inner state of enlightenment, a shift in awareness that unlocked the hidden fabric of existence. Heaven was not a destination, it was a realization, and those who reached this realization would no longer see themselves as mere mortals, but as something far greater, co-creators of reality, divine beings experiencing a temporary human form. The Gospel of Thomas, one of the lost texts discovered in 1945, contains one of the most striking statements attributed to Jesus. The kingdom is inside of you and all around you, yet people do not see it. This verse echoes the ancient Hermetic principle of as above, so below, as within, so without. The outer world is a reflection of the inner world, and by changing one's perception, the entire experience of reality can be transformed. The mystical traditions of antiquity understood that reality is not fixed. It is fluid, shaped by the mind and spirit. This idea, once considered esoteric, is now supported by modern quantum physics, which suggests that the observer affects reality, that the act of perception itself influences the material world. Jesus' teachings align perfectly with this concept. When he spoke of faith, the size of a mustard seed moving mountains, he was not referring to simple belief. He was pointing to the ability of human consciousness to shape the world. Those who truly understood this teaching would no longer live as passive participants in life, but as deliberate architects of their own existence. The early mystics who followed Jesus knew that the true power of his message lay in self-mastery. They practiced meditation, visualization, breathwork, and sacred rituals to bring themselves into alignment with the divine. They sought to transcend the illusion of separation and merge with the greater intelligence that governs the universe. This form of spiritual practice was considered dangerous by religious authorities because it eliminated the need for external control. A person who knows how to harness their own divine energy, who understands the nature of existence, and who recognizes their own ability to manifest reality, cannot be ruled through fear. Mysticism has always been a path for the few, not because it is meant to be exclusive, but because it requires dedication, discipline, and a willingness to unlearn everything society has conditioned into the mind. The journey toward esoteric wisdom follows a specific pattern, one seen in the teachings of Jesus, in ancient mystery schools, and even in modern spiritual awakenings. The calling is a deep sense that something is missing, that the world is not as it seems. The disillusionment, realizing that conventional knowledge is incomplete, that truth has been hidden. The process of seeking involves the exploration of ancient texts, hidden teachings, and forgotten wisdom. The initiation is a moment of profound realization, a shift in awareness that alters perception. The mastery is the ability to use knowledge, intention, and spiritual alignment to reshape one's existence. Everything experienced is filtered through consciousness. The mind does not passively receive information. It interprets, colors, and projects meaning onto the world. Two people can look at the same event and see two entirely different realities, one finding opportunity, another seeing only misfortune. What we call attraction is not mere psychology. It is the very mechanism by which reality unfolds. The way individuals think, feel, and believe determines what they attract, how they respond, and what possibilities become available to them. Jesus alluded to this concept often. He declared that the kingdom of heaven is not a physical place, but a state of being, one that already exists within. If heaven is within, then so too is hell, not as a literal location, but as a condition created by one's own thoughts, fears, and attachments. Those who live in a state of constant fear, doubt, or resentment unknowingly shape a reality filled with struggle and limitation. Those who cultivate inner peace, clarity, and self-mastery find that the world reflects harmony, abundance, and meaning. The world does not dictate one's state of mind. Rather, one's state of mind dictates how the world appears. Modern science is only now beginning to confirm what ancient spiritual traditions have always known. Thoughts have energy, and energy influences matter. The field of quantum physics suggests that observation affects reality, that the very act of perception can alter the outcome of events. The teachings of Jesus perfectly align with this. When he spoke of faith moving mountains, he was not offering poetic encouragement. He was pointing to the deep truth that belief itself shapes the material world. A person who believes in their own power acts with certainty, and the world responds to that certainty. Someone who believes in lack, failure, or unworthiness will unconsciously create experiences that reinforce those beliefs. The cycle feeds itself over and over until something disrupts it. One of the greatest deceptions humanity has ever embraced is the illusion of division, the belief that there is a fundamental separation between self and world, between subject and object, between creator and creation. This illusion keeps people feeling powerless, convincing them that life is something happening to them rather than something unfolding through them. If this message resonates with you, consider clicking Super. Thanks. You'll be helping to keep this hidden wisdom alive and ensuring that more people have the chance to awaken to the truth. Jesus sought to dissolve this illusion. His words in the Gospel of Philip reflect this. The world is an illusion. If you see it as real, you will remain trapped. But if you see through it, you will be free. To break free from this illusion is to understand that everything outside is a reflection of what is inside. The anger seen in the world is the anger within. The love that is lacking externally is the love not yet cultivated internally. Every experience is an invitation to look inward and adjust one's internal state, because the moment the inside changes, the outside must follow. This is why the true transformation Jesus spoke of was never about changing laws, rulers, or external conditions. It was always about changing oneself, knowing that when the inner world shifts, the entire universe bends to accommodate that shift. For centuries, the true teachings of Jesus have been distorted, hidden, and buried beneath religious doctrine. His message was never about blind faith or obedience, but about self-realization and transformation. The lost wisdom reveals that divinity is not external. It is something within each individual, waiting to be awakened. The illusion of separation has been the greatest tool of control. Institutions created fear-based narratives to keep people dependent, ensuring that they looked outward for salvation rather than recognizing their own power. But the hidden knowledge was never destroyed, only suppressed, waiting for those willing to seek it. Reality is not fixed. It mirrors the mind and spirit. Those who master their thoughts, emotions, and consciousness shape the world around them. This was the true message of Jesus, not submission, but empowerment. The time of forgetting is over. The lost wisdom has resurfaced, and those who embrace it will no longer live as mere followers, but as creators of their own destiny. Thanks for watching. Join our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.